I got down on my knees to pray, feeling rather self-conscious. I was glad of the column, which hid me from some of those present. I put my hands together and closed my eyes. What should I say? It suddenly dawned on me that I didn't really have to say anything. God knows everything, and He already knew what I wanted to say. In a flash of understanding, I suddenly felt myself unified with everything that existed. There were no barriers. For the first time, I really understood what people mean when they say that God is loving and good. I got up off my knees and, without opening my eyes, sat back in the pew to savour the moment. My aunt slid onto the bench beside me. I barely noticed her. I kept my eyes shut. She shook me. "Wake up," she hissed, "and wipe that smug-looking smile off your face. This is God's house, not a dormitory." She thrust a coin into my hand. "You can put this into the bag when the offertory comes round. I'm going back now to play the opening hymn, and don't you dare let me catch you falling asleep again. Do you hear now?" "Yes, Aunt," I murmured. She slipped away through the gap at the end of the pew, and a moment later I heard a muffled hum that rose in pitch as the organ's electric blower gathered speed. This was accompanied by a medley of squeaks, creaks and wheezes as the resuscitating air from the instrument's electric lungs breathed life into its metal and wooden arteries. Its musical soul returned to consciousness. A little bell tinkled. The congregation stood in a rasping scrape of feet. The organ burst into sound, and I winced. It was horribly out of tune. I stood on tiptoe and craned my neck, but couldn't see Winnie. Only the vicar's head popped dramatically up as God's representative in the opening above the lectern. I couldn't help smiling. God needs no representative. He is ever present, closer than your heartbeat. It was Mrs. Rumble's request for a prayer that had put me on this track. "Thank you, Mrs. Rumble," I breathed. The service rolled along in a centuries-old routine. It resembled closely the one I knew from the convent, but the familiar Latin phrases were now nearly all in English. This gave them a new, brain-punching force. We were reciting the creed when the phrase, "His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ," hit me like a bolt of lightning right between the eyes. 1,000,000 volts flashed around inside my head, lighting it up like the jackpot on a pinwheel machine. If Jesus was God's only Son, where did that leave me? Did I then have no kind of father at all, except the simpering vicar? I sat slowly down on the pew to think about this. My aunt's forceful hand yanked me back upright again. "You don't sit down during the creed," she hissed. I propped myself up with my hands on the front of the pew and let the windy words of the creed blow over and around my head. I tried to collect my thoughts, but they turned to fluff and blew away with the resounding words. "I'll think about this later," I promised myself. The praying came to an end, and the organ wheezed and creaked back to life for a hymn. I listened attentively for the choir, but could hardly hear it, shut away as it was behind the screen, and the organ was too close to me. Worse, the robot-like playing of my aunt had no expression and only 3 levels of volume: loud, louder, and very loud. Some of the pipes were wailing out of tune, but my aunt didn't seem to notice it as she continued to pull the stops that brought them into play. It was a relief when the service ended. My aunt played the congregation out with a series of connected chords. Mercifully, she chose a soft flute stop that was reasonably in tune. I closed my eyes to quieten the wild chase of my thoughts. A calm settled over me. Bothering my head with questions about the only Son of God was about as important as a speck of dust in a sunbeam. God didn't have sons and daughters. He was father to everything that existed. Mother too, for that matter. It was just as simple as that. I was shaken out of this meditation by my aunt. "Wake up! How dare you sleep in church, particularly after I forbade it? Here comes Mr. White to hear you sing. Stand up now and greet him politely."